Right now, we're going to be talking about Chelsea and the situation with some of their players, because a lot of their youngsters have been leaving this summer. We had Guehi joining Crystal Palace. Bate has joined Leeds. You've got Academy star Livramento, who is Brighton bound. Miles Harris has just joined Brentford as well. We know, Darren, about the production line at Chelsea, and my goodness, what an academy they do have, and some of the stars that they bring through, and a lot of them do end up going out on loan. We've seen that many a season, but it now seems as though the tide is turning a little bit, and a lot of players are now moving on from Chelsea. Why do you think? I say, why do you think that is? It's probably quite obvious, because it's going to be very difficult for them to break in to the Chelsea side. Is this something that we're just going to see more and more of, do you think, with Chelsea players, realising that potentially they have to move away, these youngsters, to get any kind of first-team football?
I think you do see it, and you will see it a lot more with the bigger clubs, because the bigger clubs have money to go out and spend in the market. I think with Chelsea, it's different with Chelsea, because when Frank Lampard was there, they played the youngsters, but he was forced to play the youngsters with the transfer ban. So that's the reason why all the youngsters were there. Mason Mount was brilliant. Tammy Abraham, I don't think, had a league game before Frank Lampard took over, so then he did. Obviously, Tomori went to Derby with him as well. Reece James, I mean, he brought through all these young players, and I think when he had the opportunity to go in the transfer market, he spent an awful lot on, Havertz, Werner, I listed him, Ziyech, Pulisic, Chilwell. I mean, he went out and spent a lot of money, and essentially lost his job, because he wasn't, after the money spent, he wasn't performing as good as they should have done. So I think if you're a youngster, and you're at Chelsea, who's got that money, they know Roman Abramovich will go and spend, they know Thomas Tuchel, whoever it may be as a manager, might not last long. I think you look to go away. I think in terms of Guehi, he's gone to Crystal Palace. I don't think he played a league game for Chelsea. 18 million plus add-ons. So that's a lot of money that Crystal Palace have spent on someone like Guehi, who hasn't played a league game for Chelsea. So they're going to look to go away, and they'll want to be in a team where they feel they have the best opportunity to play in the first team. And I think not just Chelsea, all the top teams that have that money, you will see. I mean, Foden's an example of one that's stuck around and made the right call. But I think if Mason Mount, Reece James in particular, if Thomas Tuchel was the manager, I think they'd have still broken in, but not the rise as quick as they did.
But do you think then, even with, say, the transfer embargo, where we did see some of these players emerge, would they have been given that opportunity under Frank Lampard if they hadn't have had that embargo?
I think if you're good enough, cream always rises to the top, as they say. And if you're good enough, you'll always play. But I don't think you'd have, particularly Mason Mount, who had a fantastic Euros, I don't think the rise would have been as quick. I think because Frank Lampard proved that once he had money to spend, he went out and spent it. And I think Thomas Tuchel will do exactly the same thing. When you've got, listen, it's rumours, I know, but when you've got 150 million that you can go and spend on Erling Haaland, if you're Tammy Abraham, who's not Thomas Tuchel's favourite at the moment, but you have to go. You have to go and try and make it elsewhere. So all these young players that want to make a living need to start off probably lower and let's take a backward step to go forward. And I think that's what you're going to see a lot of.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I'm sure the Chelsea Academy will be delighted by any of their players going on to play first team football, whether that's actually at Chelsea or elsewhere, because that shows the production line does work, that they are producing stars of the future for football, I should say. There's always a tinge of disappointment that perhaps they didn't go on to play for Chelsea or didn't get the opportunities to play for Chelsea, and no doubt fans, we always want to see our homegrown players starting in our various games, but for whatever reason sometimes it doesn't quite work out, and as we've mentioned, a lot of these players are now moving on to pastures new. And what happens as well, when you're in a transfer embargo, you have no choice, you've got to play them. But as soon as you start seeing your rivals spend money, strengthening, and then you suddenly have that kitty to now spend, it's inevitable that that's going to happen because you have to strengthen, and it's very difficult, I suppose, to wait around for the next Mason Mount because you don't have time as a manager to do that. You have to spend to try and bring instant success.
You do, yeah, and I think success is the key word there. And I think if you look at, there's been criticism pointing towards certain managers that are learning on the job, and I think if you look at it in that way, does a team like Chelsea, does a club like Chelsea, who Abramovich demands success, demands trophies, can they afford players to be learning on the job as well? I don't think they can, and it's unfortunate because some of these players will go away and be fantastic players. I mean, some of them may not, and that happens with every football club. Like I said, the fact Chelsea have got 18 plus add-ons for Gurhi, who hasn't played really for Chelsea at all, is outstanding. And if they manage to get rid of Tammy Abraham for 30-40 million, again, that opens up funds for them to go out and spend big money on these big players that essentially, not so much supporters because they love homegrown talent, but the club demands, really, when you're a team like Chelsea, a club like Chelsea who wins trophies and wants to be success, you demand it immediately. And I know Abramovich does as well. So if it opens up funds for him to go and buy these big players and then win trophies, win Champions Leagues and leagues, I mean, it's all good for them.
No, absolutely. And as I said, as fans, we want to see our own playing out on the pitch. But if you're going to win a trophy like the Champions League and you've done it by buying in players, I think most fans are also pretty delighted by that as well. So I mean, it's a bit of both.
When you're at the lesser clubs in the Premier League, should you say as well, and you have these players filtering down from the big clubs, that also stops the progress of their homegrown talent. I mean, you'll get more homegrown talent come in from the lesser clubs in the Championship and League One because they can't afford to go out. But letting Tammy Abraham, Gurhi, players like that go for relatively cheap in terms of Premier League, you're going to lose out on some of your homegrown talent as well. So it does filter down. But when clubs demand success and progression, you have to buy players, and that's what they're doing.
So for you, Tammy Abraham, does he have to leave Chelsea now?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, it's evident that Thomas Tuchel is not a fan of Tammy Abraham. I think, again, talking about taking a slight step back to go forward, I think Tammy has to do that, and I think there'll be takers for sure, 30-40 million pound, whatever it may be. I think he's been okay at Chelsea, hasn't had the opportunities he's wanted under Thomas Tuchel, but that happens with managers and players. Sometimes you don't get these opportunities when you can bring in players, and I think to trial Havertz as a false nine as opposed to putting Tammy in, I think he'll know himself that it's probably right to go try and become a main man somewhere and see where that takes him.
Yeah, I think it's a big sign if you're using a false number 9 as opposed to the number 9 you already have in your squad. Arsenal is a team that's been linked with Tammy Abraham. Is that the sort of side you could see him going to? Does he fit into Arsenal?
He would, I think. Aubameyang's form is questionable. Is he going to come back and be the Aubameyang of old? We don't know. But I think all them clubs, really, Arsenal, West Ham have been linked with him as well. I think he'd fit really well. Working for Palace, being a Palace guy myself, I've touted him for Palace. I think he'd be outstanding for Crystal Palace, going in. Type of player that they're looking at the moment, young players, that's exciting. But I think there'll be a number of suitors for Tammy Abraham because essentially he's coming from Chelsea. He's worked under some good managers and Thomas Tuchel don't fancy him. So people are going to want to sign him. How much that's going to cost, I don't know, and how much people are willing to pay for him. But I think he'll do well at a club, Arsenal, West Ham. You have the top 4 at the moment. I class them as the second group at this precise moment. Spurs as well. I think he'd have a lot of takers, and I think he'd do well.
Just lastly on the situation with Chelsea and the players outgoing who've come through that academy. It might be good for the club at Chelsea in terms of, well, look, we want to get you off our wage bill. You're bringing in money through your transfer fees, etc., etc. But how disappointing is it, maybe from a fan's perspective, that what you're doing is you're strengthening your opposition, possibly, by, selling your players to them, players that you've nurtured for a long, long time and given very little opportunity to.
Yeah, I think the feeling of a bit of disappointment soon goes if you buy the right people with the money that's come in and you start winning trophies. I think that soon goes. And like I said, some of these players that leave, they work out and you get question marks over why did you let him leave? He should never have gone. I mean, a lot of them don't work out as well, or they go on to perhaps the level that they are at that particular moment. So, like I said, if they go away and Chelsea in particular, they sign a big player and they end up winning trophies, I think that feeling of disappointment soon goes.
Jim White and Simon Jordan, Monday to Thursday morning, 10 till 1. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.